This is Veronica from History Victorum. Join us as we visit St. Mary's Church in Lindisfarne, also known as Holy Island. There is architecture in this building from Anglo-Saxon, Norman, and early English periods. It has the oldest human-built structure in Lindisfarne. There is a copy of the Lindisfarne Gospels in the church. It is closely tied to St. Cuthbert and has a sculpture representing the journey of St. Cuthbert's remains. In 634 AD, King Oswald ascended to the throne in Bernicia, which is just south of Lindisfarne. He had been exiled along with his brothers when his father died and his uncle took control of the kingdom. During his exile, he spent time in the island of Iona with Irish monks, where he converted to Christianity. Once he became king, he provided lands in Lindisfarne to monks from Iona with the idea to bring Christianity to Northumbria. King Oswald personally chose a new bishop of Lindisfarne, who would later be known as Saint Aidan, after the previous bishop left and returned to Iona, declaring the Anglo-Saxons to be too barbaric for his liking. The new bishop, Saint Aidan, founded a monastery at this site. Here we have a statue of Saint Aidan. Lindisfarne would later become one of the centers of Christianity in Britain. There has been prayer and worship continuously on this site for nearly 1400 years. From 635 to 660, it is believed that there were two Anglo-Saxon churches built from wood. St. Peter's was built in the area of the current priory's ruins, and St. Mary under the current parish church. When you walk through, you'll notice that the two current buildings are aligned with each other, which is due to the placement of the original Anglo-Saxon buildings. It was not until 698, when the famous bishop Cuthbert's body was being moved from his original burial place to a new coffin shrine, that Lindisfarne became a center for Christianity. When placing the body in its new burial place, they found that Cuthbert's body was incorrupt, meaning his body had not decayed, and it was considered proof of his saintliness. Soon afterwards, miracles were reported to have taken place by his shrine, which resulted in Lindisfarne becoming the major Christian pilgrimage site in Northumbria. This continued until the first major Viking attack on the west, which took place at Lindisfarne in 793. St. Cuthbert's remains were unharmed, and it was in 875 that St. Cuthbert's remains left Lindisfarne and finally settled in Durham in 995. It is believed that the first church was an Anglo-Saxon church made out of wood around 635, and that by 800 it was replaced by a stone church. Here we can see in the church's plans where it is believed the first wooden church stood in red compared to the current church, which is in black. Here we have a sculpture of 6 monks taking St. Cuthbert's body on its journey from Lindisfarne to Durham, which started in 875 and ended in 995. The elm sculpture is by Fenwick Lawson, and it was crafted mostly with a chainsaw. The reason that St. Cuthbert's body was moved from Lindisfarne is due to the repeated Viking attacks on the Holy Island. His body was not touched in the initial raid, and when you consider the fact that this was a pilgrimage site, it then became necessary to move him to a safer location. You'll see here those rounded arches in the northern aisle, which are from the 1100s. These are Norman work and distinct from the southern aisle. Here in the southern aisle, you'll notice the early English pointed arches. These pointed arches were built about 100 years after the Norman arches on the northern aisle. Here we're going to stop and look at the oldest part of the church, which is the entry wall to the chancel, where the altar is located. Here you can see the early English arch, which is pointed at the top, and just above it you'll notice that there is a rounder arch, which is actually the Saxon Doorway. The Saxon Doorway is considered the oldest human structure on the island and is estimated to possibly being more than 1,000 years old. Here we have copies of the Lindisfarne Gospels. The Lindisfarne Gospels are considered a masterpiece of early medieval art that was produced around 700 to 725 AD at Lindisfarne. Between the lines, there were translations, which make this the earliest Gospels in a form of English. It is a copy of the Latin New Testament, and the 258 pages required unblemished skin from about 150 calves in order to create the parchment paper required. It was written to honor God and Saint Cuthbert. Each of the 4 Gospels begin with an initial page and then a full-page portrait of the Gospel's author and his symbol. Here we're looking at a copy that has St. Luke's portrait at the beginning of the Gospel of St. Luke, with a bull or calf at the top which represents St. Luke. Thank you for joining History Victorum. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe to our channel.